Welcome everyone to Esoteric Thoughts YouTube channel. And for those who don't know, Esoteric Thoughts is a channel that seeks to provoke deep thoughts about life, religion, the Bible, mythology, spirituality, etc. It's a platform that encourages open discussion about a range of topics that can or do affect us. Tonight we'll be discussing the practice of polyandry, and that is a practice where a woman has more than one husband simultaneously. This is a cultural practice that has been in existence for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years from what the records I could find, in parts of Africa, East Asia, and South America. In many of those cultures, due to the onslaught of religion, those practices are no longer happening, but in East Asia, it's still happening. So we'll start with a roll call. So if everyone could possibly state their name and their position on this topic, whether they're for it, against it, or indifferent, and just wish to discuss and learn. So I'm going to have to just roll call everyone from who's in my list. So I'll start with Neeks. You're first on my list.
Greetings everyone, my name is Neeks. I'm based in Buckinghamshire in the UK. My thoughts initially are that I'm all for anybody doing whatever they like as long as it's not harming anybody, but I'm not sure if it could work, so I'm a little bit sceptical as to how it could work in this modern day.
Thank you, Neeks. And then John, can we ask for everyone to have their cameras on, please? So John is next in my list.
Yeah, my name's John. My views on this are, I'd say I'm in London, East London, and my views on this are very much indifferent. And my views have changed over time. Initially, I was against it and thought that it was a real problem for the man who would be involved in a relationship like that. But my views on this have changed, and yeah, I'd like to openly discuss where it goes.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And Roz, your camera isn't on. I'll move on to Karema, please.
Yes, greetings everyone. So my name is Karema. Thank you, Kasati, for inviting me on this discussion. I think it's a very important discussion as it involves family, and family is like foundational to everything that we do, as children are born into relationships, and that sets the foundation for how we see and how we view life for the rest of our life. So I think it's a very important topic, and I don't have a for or against. As a man, it's not something that I would want to enter into or that I would choose to enter into. That's my position, but I'm very, very interested to hear any argument or anyone. I've never come across anyone who's been involved in polyandry. So I'd love to hear from anyone that has been involved or that wants to be involved and their reasons why.
Thank you, Karema. Esther, greetings.
Greetings everyone. So yeah, my name is Esther. I've not really had a discussion around this before, or even an awareness per se, and I don't have a yes or a no. I guess for me, bottom line, like this gentleman just said, it is about family and how it affects and influences and impacts, and also where we are within our energetic and awareness cycle. You know, I believe you can have a relationship with anyone or anything, depends on where you are within your spiritual evolution and awareness, and then what you attract into that space. And that's when it goes down to, you know, how it affects family, because everyone's different, and you know what people do behind closed doors is what people do behind closed doors. But then if we are all connected, then on some level it will impact or influence and affect what's around us. So I'm open to hearing more discussion around that.
Thank you, Esther. Next, Claudia, please.
I'm Claudia. I'm just very curious to hear people's thoughts on the subject. I do have a lot of spiritual connections with people, so I'm very open to hear how it works, if it works, can it work? Yeah, that's it basically. Cool.
Thank you. Judy.
Hi, greetings.
Greetings.
Okay, for me, it's all about consent and how you manage that situation or that arrangement. And in terms of family, I think that's really poignant. I'm wondering how it's going to work. I did a little bit of reading around the topic, and my understanding is that it's mostly men that have the rights over the children in those arrangements. So I do wonder the impact that that's going to have on the family and on the child's development. But I suppose I'm open. I think it's about consent, and I'm also open to what the possible benefits might be in a society. And I can't see it really working for me. And I can't really see how it could work in a Western society either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy. We've got a couple here, Kenneman and Shadia. Greetings.
Okay. Ojai, greetings. Greetings. Dua Kasati for this very interesting subject. My name's Kenneman Fakara. My views on it isn't really a matter of an opinion. It's just what is in line with the preservation of life and what is in line with Kemetic culture. So my view of it, as far as I know, it's not supported within the Kemetic culture, so I'm not supporting it. As far as I know, if it is supported, then and I hear differently, then I'll support it. But other than that, I'm not supporting it. I don't support it.
Thank you, Kenneman. Shadia.
Good day, greetings everyone. I'm not a for or against. You know, I'm open to hear others' opinions on it and whether it suits them and how it would work. But well, at this stage, I'm not going to answer, but I feel, just thinking very generally around it, it's not something for myself. But other than that, just because it's not for myself doesn't mean that I don't want to hear about it, hence me being here this evening. Yeah, so just curious to hear how it would work. Agree with Sister Judy, where Western world, I doubt that it could work in the Western society, but I'm happy to hear and listen to all.
Thank you for that. We have Bertha next, please. Is it Bertha?
Yeah. Hi. What was the question?
It was just for everyone to introduce themselves and briefly say whether they're for it or against the culture, the practice, and then we move on to the next one to introduce themselves before we get into the discussion.
Okay. I'm Berta. I'm actually from Canada, so it's like 1 p.m. here. And I am for it. It's been kind of hard to find people who are open-minded about it, but I want to hear like everybody else's experiences and stories.
Thank you. Moving on to Kanipsa, please.
Greetings. My name is Kanipsa. Yeah, I'm really here to see how how this concept fits within the traditional or the origins of the family model. And, you know, I'm not for it or against it, but I'm just curious to see, you know, how it fits within the origins of the traditional family structure.
Thank you, Canipso. Moving on to Neferista, please.
Greetings, hello everyone. My name is Neferista Merusheta. I am a single mom of 3 wonderful boys, and I live in Baltimore, Maryland. And I will honestly say there was a time that I would have been completely for it, for polyandry. But now I would say, looking at how things fit in nature and understanding, you know, what a family structure is for, and we as women, what we're capable of doing, it doesn't make as much sense to me now. But I think when we look at the world, there's a lot more that goes into our decision making on what is for us or against us as individuals. So I'm excited to hear what everyone's going to say and being part of this discussion.
Thank you, Neferista. Next, Lydia, please.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Lydia. It's an interesting topic, and I've done a little research, not very much, but I can understand the concept behind why it will be favorable to have this practice going. Although we're in the West, and we've adapted a lot of things that we believe what's been told seems to be very wrong. But I'm open to hear more, and I'll leave it on that.
Thanks, Lydia. Carnefa, please.
Greetings, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Carnefa. When I first heard about the topic, I must admit I didn't know much about it, and I still don't think I know a lot about it, but what has been explained to me, I'm not against it. Usually especially, I think it is an ancient practice. It's not something that came about in the modern world. I think it's something that's ancient, and it should have morals, it should have principles, guidelines that you go by. And if anything, it should have come from a divine place, as opposed from a human sitting down thinking about, how they're going to recreate in a certain way. And I do believe in survival. So if you're put in a situation whereby your family or your bloodline or something is not going to thrive, and you're going to come and you've seen a principle or a concept from the divine world, because nothing's new, right? So if it's come from somewhere like that, then who am I to say that it's wrong? If it's personally something that I would practice, I can't foresee that, but I am really interested to find out more about the subject. I really am. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Carnefa. Next, Rose, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Rose, and I actually do agree with it.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I agree with it, even though I'm just willing to listen to what everybody else has to say.
Okay.
So for now, I'll just listen.
Okay, thank you. We can't see you very well because your camera's a bit dark. I'm gonna move on.
I've tried to turn it up, but I can't.
It's okay. Nepal next, please.
Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me all right, I hope?
Yes.
So I want to say welcome to everyone, and I'm very happy to be invited by Esoteric to be a part of this panel. I am actually a relationship behavioral counselor. Some people may classify me as a marriage doula. I specialize in polyamorous relationships. I am an advocate for polygyny marriage, and I'm just here to add some balance and give some advice if needed from an experienced point of view. So welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Nepal. And then next we've got Galaxy A52 5G. That's Satmahata.
Oh, Ujjayi. Hello to everyone. Hello to all of my family. I hope everybody's doing good. You know, I'm a little old school. This a little, you know, it's a little different for me. You know, I have to say from my previous lifestyle and my experiences, I don't say that I'm for this. I don't see how it works. I did a little research on it because I think I wasn't really clear. So I researched it, and what I researched, it was not something that was practiced within Kim culture. I don't find that that is practiced in Kim culture. I found it practiced in some cultures within India and some cultures within Tibet. And that's what I looked up and what I could find in the small time that I had to research it and to look it up. Yeah, this is a different kind of thing. And I think in this kind of conversation, we have to ask a whole lot of different questions within ourselves and within the relationship that we're going to get ourselves, you know, be into. So, and I'm here to learn and a little bit more about it. If I have anything wrong, I'm open to learn a little bit more. But I'm not, for myself, I'm not for it. No, I don't see the benefits that it would have. And it causes me to, when I think about it, it causes me to ask more questions about it. Well, how is this going to work? How's that going to work? You know, and not to say that those questions couldn't be answered or couldn't be worked through. I just know myself, nope, you know, been there, done that. Nope, does not work. So that's what I can say on that.
Thank you, Satmahata.
Oh, yeah.
And lastly, I would like to introduce myself because I didn't do so. I'm Kasati Hekama. Right now, as Satmahat was saying, this is not even a right or wrong discussion. This is just an open discussion. The knowledge that I've gained on this subject by doing some very, very intensive research, I must say, it was practiced in at least 4 different countries in Africa. And I'm not saying the whole country, but certain villages and groups of people from the Congo, Tanzania, Nigeria, Namibia, and Kenya. And it's a very complex practice, and everything was done within frameworks. So it wasn't about, or it isn't about, promiscuity. Now, when I looked at the Tibetans, they actually practice fraternal polyandry, and that is brothers having more than one, sharing one wife. And that is done, that has been done amongst them for hundreds of years. And that's due to economics and not having enough land space to grow food. And they were asked the question, don't you get jealous, and who's the baby daddy and all of that? And they tended to deal with that. They said they didn't have any jealousy amongst them. They were brothers. And from what I've noticed in the research that I've done in regards to the children, Rose, could you turn your mic off for those who are not speaking, please? Because I think we get feedback. For those who, in relation to the children, it was always a case that the fathers were fathers to the children. They weren't squabbling to say, well, this one is not mine, this one is mine. Just like we know that a woman can be mothers to many children, whether it's a bloodline or not. This is what I acknowledge that I gleaned from the little bit of research that I did. I managed to find at least 10 PDFs of research papers going back to the 1800s. And it was a case of the fathers looked after the children as if they were their own. And I even found something today that mentioned that the men actually benefited from this system, and they formed alliances amongst themselves by sharing the one wife. Present day, probably, we don't know, but Esther is going to speak first on her thoughts on this, because she's not going to be able to stay long with us. So Esther, is it possible for you to speak on which I asked you about this, the spiritual implications of these unions between men and women, because we know that energetically there are residue. So please, Esther, I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you. You took me a bit by surprise then. Like I said, I can't really speak about the subject per se because I don't have enough information. That's why it's just been good to be on this platform to gain more insight. But I can speak from it, I would say, from a spiritual perspective or an energetic perspective, because they always say when you are in a relationship or you become intimate with something, there's an exchange of energy. And so it would be what happens with that energy, what happens to that energy. And as Sister Judy said about consent is really important. But then I think we also have to put this in a context. Are we speaking about this? Is our curiosity about it being applied in this present day and age and time? And then what does that mean? Is that making sense? Because, for me, relationships should be coming from a place of honor and respect and having all those fundamentals. So I would start off this conversation from that space, Sis Kasati.
Yes, and as we know, regardless of the relationship, whether it's friendships, whether it's marriage, that mutual respect should always be there. So
respect and honoring, because if you're in an intimate relationship, and maybe the word honor is different for everyone, but if we try to put it in the context of, are we talking about what is our understanding or openness to it now? Because I believe when it was practiced, it meant something different. So it's about context, because now, in terms of how we've evolved within ourselves, within our own emotional awareness, within our own emotional and spiritual awareness, I don't think we're there anymore to be able to, and that's just me, fully appreciate what it could bring now, unless we are evolved enough or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mean spiritual and intellectual involvement,
and moral. Spiritual and emotional involvement, to understand how that would work, how that concept would work now in terms of where we are within our understanding, within our spiritual understanding and awareness.
Yeah, well, as I said, when I actually watched two families who were practicing that, and they lived with their parents, and the parents also came from polyandrous relationships. So as I said, it's something that's from generation to generation. This is in Nepal. If anyone wants to do their research afterwards. And they worked, they coexisted together. Many people think that the woman is being used and abused in relationships like that. And what I found that the men, although they had their individual roles to do, and she also had her role to do as a mother, and she had 3 children, the men also assisted her in her daily tasks where they could. So it wasn't a case that she was in a position that she was doing everything and slaving away for these 3 brothers. And likewise, the couples in India, it was the same. And they actually put the woman on a high pedestal. And she has a son. She doesn't know which one of the 5 brothers actually fathered the son, but they all see that child as their child, you know. So I know in Africa, I don't believe it's still happening. But in East Asia, it is still happening. So many people might think it's that old that it's no longer happening, but it is actually still happening. And there may be pockets in Africa where it is still happening. So I've not been able to delve into that research myself to see if it is still happening. But I know, for instance, even in the Congo, you actually see men actually suckling children, you know, and say like here in the West, they'll give their child, what they call them, we call them soothers, when they put them things in the child's mouth. The men actually carry the children around on their chests, and if that child needed comforting, they allow them to suck their nipples. And here, that would be so heavily frowned upon in the West. But these are practices that they have been doing for many, many hundreds of years. But anyway, I'm going to say less. And I think we'll speak to Bertha, who said that she was actually practicing polyandry at the moment. Is that correct, Bertha?
I'm trying to, but it's really hard to find anybody who's like even accepting of it, because it's not really practiced by like anybody I know. So I found polyamory groups who I speak to, and I'm trying to get to know people in that sort of area, but I haven't seen any. The one lady from a group, she has her 2 fiancés, I believe, and I see that as polyandry, but I'm not totally certain. But it's hard to find anybody who's even accepting of it.
So do you mind me asking, why are you actually seeking that?
Well, after a couple years of how my relationships have went, I started looking into different types of polyamory. And when I came across polyandry, I'm like, this like speaks to me, I guess. And it's like, this could be something really well and unique, I guess, to this side of Canada, because yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Rose, did you want to speak about, I think you were one of the ones that said that you're in favor of. Rose?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Are you able to turn your camera on, please?
Jeez. I'm having a bit of technical problems.
Okay, we can see you now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm in agreement to a certain degree, because I don't think that we're made up of so much different personalities as one person. We've got so much different sides to ourselves. And I don't believe that one person can fulfill all the sides. Well, talking about myself personally, of my personality, my character. So I look at it from that point of view. It's not really from, per se, a sexual point of view. It's just having different people in my life to fulfill different needs that I have and different interests.
Okay, but would you consider that to be polyandrous, or?
I can see where I will be accepting for it to go there eventually, yes.
Okay.
But it would have to be with certain people that I might have even known before. I don't think I could just enter it with strangers. It would have to be people that I've already known and know about them and their lifestyle and everything like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this?
Ujjayi, it's me, Samahata.
Yeah.
I just had a couple questions, because like there's when we talk about a woman being energetic, you know, and the way that, if we look at the way that a woman body is, our body is meant to receive things. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, it makes it real difficult, other than when we talk about in the time when this was practiced in like the Tibetan culture and the different cultures, there were certain reasons why these things were practiced at that time. And I think that when we look it up, it was for specific reasons. It wasn't anything that had to do with the reason why it's so prevalent now. When I go on TikTok, and I'm being real clear, when I go on TikTok, when I go on different media platforms, or I even interact with young people, you know, they say, I got this one to do this, I got this one to do that, and I got this one to do that. And I'm like, wow, you know? And my first thought comes to my mind is like, if you're engaging in energies with each one of them, you're receiving those energies. Whatever they're giving you, you're receiving those energies. What are you doing to clean those energies off? You know, what are you doing for different things like that, you know? And my question was, is all of us that are here on this call and on this this feed, all of us have spiritual practices that we do. We have things that we look into to see how we maneuver our way through certain situations, and to find things that are going to work favorable for us, our ancestors, our energies. And so I'm just real curious, because all of us are like on the spiritual and energetic kind of a movement while we're here talking about different things. And my concern is how are we going to share this with all of our youth that's out there, that's watching the different things that social media puts out there, saying that it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that. You know what I'm saying? And I have grandchildren, and my first thought is like, oh, wow, look what they have to look forward to when it comes to relationships that they're going to be building. Are they going to think that it's okay for them to be out there and have more than one? I know that I've experienced a relationship where I was married at the time and I still had a husband. And this is just my experience. This is before I even did any spiritual work. And when I did that, it was always kind of hard to maneuver. There was one time when both of those, and where I come from, we called him a Sancho. I'm just being 100 with you guys. So we call them like a Sancho, as somebody that you know that you have that's on the side. And my husband, he knew about him at the time. And it was always kind of real confusing when both of them ended up being in the same place. And I remember telling them both of them couldn't put their hands on each other at the same time, you know? And it was just an interesting thing. So that is my reason for saying that this doesn't work, because I don't know that in this day and age, there's no spiritual backing that would support why we would do this. And I think that's my clear understanding. I haven't found any. So, I mean, if y'all know some that I don't know, I'm more than willing to look at that or listen to it. But I don't know that it really works for a woman, other than putting them in a false position of like power, or and I know that's a wrong word to say, because in a relationship with a man and a woman, each one of them are equally important to the stability of if they're going to have a family, you know. So we talking about a whole lot of different things in this conversation that could go on, that could be part 1, part 2, part 3, and I don't know how you guys are going to do it, but it's so many different conversations to have on this kind of level, because 1, we're talking about things energetically, 2, we're talking about things sexually, and then we're talking about things this Western society and what it says, and then we're talking about cultural things that people come with. And I think that's the one thing that we're forgetting, that each one of us come with certain things that kind of govern us as a human being, or as a human. So, I mean, it's a deep conversation. I know I wanted to ask the lady, like, what made you in your previously relationships want to have this type of relationship where you have more than one man? And forgive me because I forgot your name.
Were you speaking to me?
I'm sorry, you and the lady from Canada, both of you guys, because when you were saying that you wanted it to evolve into a sexual relationship,
no,
that
it could do.
Oh, it could evolve into a sexual relationship.
I was in one for 34 years, but just me and one person. No, me and one person.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You and one person. And then,
Yes.
so what made it so that you decided, okay, you know what? I need another man to fulfill that type of, not saying it's bad or anything, I'm just asking a question. But what made it?
It's not even a need. Can you still hear me? Okay.
I touched something. I'm sorry. There we go. No, I think I'm still here.
Yeah, we can hear you, Rose.
Yeah, it's not even a need. It's just something that like I said before, just having different conversations, doing different things. Everybody's got different interests. And me as my person individually, I've got a lot, and not one person can cater for all of that. So it's not even a need. I think it's just something that would suit me at the stage I'm at my life now.
Okay.
But I do take into consideration. This is why I'm listening to everything people say. And even though I'm aware of the spiritual aspect of it and all of that, what I've heard today, it would actually make me do think about it in a different way, because even though I know spiritually we do transfer from one person to another, so that's, I think, is the only thing that would make me double think what I was actually thinking before, because I do like to protect my spiritual self. So yes, it's interesting to hear all of the different views of everybody. Very interesting.
If you don't mind, I jump in, and I just want to get, I know we did our introductions, but if we can just get a quick consensus on who actually on the panel, besides Berta and Rose, who is actually interested in polyandry, or at least curious, considering it. Just, is it just these two ladies, or is there anyone else?
I mean, I'm curious to find out more about it, but not specifically for myself. So that's where I sit with that. If I can just make one observation, if I may, very quickly, because I have to dive off soon. But when the lady from Galaxy was talking, and you talked about being a side chick. Hello, lady from Galaxy. You do have a name, sorry, but a side chick is. I'm going to say that polyandry it's more than just people dipping into each other randomly. It's a culture. It's a family unit. From that period in time. So it's not a frivolous. And so in terms, even though I mentioned about energy, if that's an agreement, as Sister Judy said, if that's an agreement in terms of a unit, then things around energy aren't as important, because you're that unit and you have that agreement. And I think we're very much in our maybe Western head in terms of how they operated and how it worked for them back then. And that's all I have to say, because I've got to go. I'm enjoying this conversation, but I do have to dive. I will listen into the recording. So, yeah.
Thank you, Esther, for being here and your inputs so far. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again another time.
Thank you. So is Esther the only one who's curious? Well,
I would say so. I would say curious, and maybe not for myself at this stage, but curious and open to how it can work and how it can be experienced spiritually. And the reason I say that is I was really interested in Casati's research, where men were working collectively with the woman to preserve and protect and provide for the family, which to me is a spiritual act. And the other thing I obviously also can relate to the sister from the Galaxy sister, in terms of how, the transmission of fluids, how that kind of works, and what systems would be in place to make sure that the woman was safe and clean. Well, all of them were safe and clean, but I would assume in places where polyandry is practiced, that there would be a system, hopefully, to kind of protect the exchange of energy. And in polygamy, I'm assuming that the man isn't necessarily sleeping with one wife on a Monday, the next wife on a Tuesday. I assume that there's a system, even in a polygamous relationship, where there's one wife that the man is sleeping with for a certain period of time. So I'm thinking in polyandry, there must be a similar system, but maybe I'm being naive. But what I did like was Casati's explanation of how the roles and responsibilities for looking after the children were done in partnership, and where there was not a conflict with different men. Yeah. So yeah, open to seeing how it could work. also, I think in a Western society, potentially very ego driven and very me focused, I can see how it could be kind of misused, but that's not making any assumptions on, you know, anybody here, you know, in this platform.
Wow, I want to jump in and just piggyback off of what Sister Judy just said at the end of that. On our polygyny panel, we discussed a lot, and it was very fulfilling, very interesting. And I did bring the issue, or the fact of that most of us, if not all of us, are Western. So if we could have a starting point for those who are interested in finding out more about the polyandrous lifestyle, if we could start at some common ground and then work our way up for those who are curious, and even for those who are starkly against it. For instance, we know that we all are part of a Western culture. So although we are discussing very true facts about Eastern culture, and it's good to know, as far as the Southern Asians and Eastern Asians and parts of Africa where polyandry, multiple husbands for one wife, is practiced, that's not something that as individuals we really would pertain to us. That's what I'm trying to say. So how about we start talking about the issues with the Western, how we are Western, we're Western people of a Western culture. And then let's start talking about the differences between men and women. So if we start there, I think we can have a very interesting conversation about the differences between polyandry and polygyny. First of all, as you know, polyandry is one wife, multiple husbands. Polygyny is one husband, multiple wives. And then we have that middle ground, because we're not going to discuss monogamy. So because we know that that's a common relationship, right? But the middle ground would be polyamory, where you have an open relationship for the husband and the wife. So your husband has other wives, he's polygynist, and you are polyandrist as a woman having multiple husbands. So there's really, I think, 3 different relationships that we can discuss and compare to really get to the pros and the cons of polyandry. So I want to start by just putting this information out here and get the conversation going on just what are the differences between women and men. It's a known fact that women and men are different, obviously. And when we talk about the differences as far as brain and psychology, the only significant difference between men and women goes to reproduction. As far as intelligence and everything else, we're straight across the board, right? But the differences, the very obvious differences between men and women all go back to reproduction. So with that understood, let me ask the panel, those who, I'll start with those who are pro-poly, like Berta and Rose, because they said they're pro. So to you ladies, have you considered those particular aspects of you being differently, wired differently than a man when it comes to reproduction, as far as it comes to sex? Like, have you sat down and said, well, you know, when I have multiple husbands, how will I approach sex? Because men approach sex differently. So either one of you or anyone can jump in and we can start discussing it that way. Did I make myself clear?
Can I just say still, Nepal, today's topic is specifically about polyandry. So if we start going into polygamy as well, and mixing everything, it just gets a bit too complex, and it's going to make the conversation longer than it should.
I think we're all intelligent enough to be able to stay on track. But
no, it's not about that. It's the time frame that it's a time frame.
I'm speaking. We can't discuss polyandry without comparing it to other relationships, particularly polygyny. Now, they're all polyamorous relationships. So I'll get back to my question with the ladies. I'll start with Berta. Berta, have you considered specifically how sex would go with you as far as in having multiple male partners, especially when it comes to reproduction? I mean, you don't have to get too personal, but can you discuss what you've considered as far as that aspect of your relationship?
So like reproduction and the sexual nature is like a part of it, but it's more fact for the emotional, if that makes sense. Just because like in myself, feeling those things emotionally and mentally is more important than like physically, but physically is like a great thing, but it also matters for like my male partners. I'm not sure, because it would just like have to be a discussion between the few of us.
Okay, well, definitely I've spoken to other people about this before. Women approach sex as far as an affectionate, emotional way, and then men approach sex. I'm not saying men aren't emotional, but we're talking about the way the brains are wired. Men approach sex for first and foremost physically, and then the emotions come in. And with that understood, the reality, even though you may be looking at polyandry as, you know, I'm a woman, I'll be able to have all this affection, you must look at the reality of a man wanting to, you have two men with two male sex drives, and you're one woman. So I'm glad that she mentioned it really flows well. Her saying, you know, I'm looking at it from an emotional side, and that's absolutely very, very feminine brain, very female brain. But I don't know if many women who are considering polyandry realize that a man's reproductive brain, he's looking, when he approaches a woman, he's looking at it as, you know, I want to have sex. Now I'm talking about one particular general type of man. Now, some men may be entering polyandry because they have performance issues or low sex drive. We're not going to talk about what we can, but what I'm talking about for the women is when you come into a relationship and you have two men, you're going to have to understand that I'm going to have to please two men physically. So, you know, I'll just, anyone can comment on that, but that's the reality. And I think, I don't want to call the sister Galaxy. What is your name, Queen?
My name is Satmahata, but yes, that's, you have to think of it on that kind of level, because you're taking on the physical aspect of the man wanting to be pleased, and their sex drive is different from ours. It's not going to be all nice and smooth and those things like that. It you know, and then you also have to take on the male ego as well. I mean, these are some things that you got to think about. You know, it's a lot of things. My name is Satmahata.
Samahata.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Yes, I like the way you put it. She said she's old school. She said they're not always smooth. Now, let me say something, Queen. Some brothers sit back there talking. They're like, I don't know who she's thinking about. I'm very smooth. But yes, I understood where you're coming from. Men approach, it's about the reproductive psyche. And men approach sex as smooth as he might be in his mind. He's wanting to physically first and foremost. Now, are they affectionate? Of course. Are they loving, emotional beings? Yes. But the hard wiring, we can go back to real quickly. We can go back to puberty. When testosterone levels are starting to increase, when a boy starts to go through puberty, he goes from 15, the level 15 of testosterone to we'll say 300 in that amount of time, from like 15 shooting straight up to 300. And during that puberty, he's focused on hardwired sex, body, oh, breast, oh, there's her physical reproductive self, you know. So saying that as far as the pubescent boy, the pubescent girl, you know what she's doing? She's looking at herself more. She's doing her hair. She wants to be pleasing and attractive. So see the differences in this, just when we go to the mind of the reproductive individual as far as male and female. The female mind is saying, I want to attract, I want to be pleasing. So it is on more of a, I guess you can say spiritual, you know, some people say emotional, on a more spiritual level, where in the beginning, looking at the puberty, boys going into puberty, they're like physical. Please understand, I'm not saying it's just cut and dry that way with individual people. We're talking about the science behind the mind. And I love the conversation about spirit. That is 100% correct. You can have a monogamous relationship and you get the spirit of that person when you're with them. So you do have to consider in any polyamorous relationship, you're getting everybody's energy. So beautiful point that you made when you said they come in, I think you said not smooth. Yeah, so I hope that, you know, I'm steering the conversation in the direction that people want to hear it go in, because it's in the back of everyone's minds. You know, we're talking about spirituality, but in the back of our minds, we know the woman's having sex with more than one husband. It's just that's the issue that people have with it, especially in Western culture. Now, does it mean we have to start shaming women for it? Absolutely not. But we have to look at the truth and the facts that there will be, as a woman, if you don't have a man who's got low sex drive or cannot perform, if you don't have that kind of polyandrous group of husbands, you're going to be, you know, quite sexually active. All right, I'll hand it over and let you all.
Yeah, the Farista, you've got your hands up, my dear. If you'd like to speak, please.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. But I think what we see, and not just in the West, but worldwide, is what we don't know, we've been taught won't hurt us. But the reality of it is what we don't know very well can and will hurt us. We just don't understand how it's happening. So when we talk about polyandry in this way, with women having more than one husband, there's so many pieces of it that we really don't have a true understanding. We don't have a true understanding of the effects of it on us spiritually. We don't have the true understanding of how it affects us physically. We don't have even a true understanding on why there's a choice to do it or not do it. I think when you first started speaking about some of the cultures that are still doing it, we don't even, us sitting here on this panel, don't even have a true understanding of why that occurred. Because we do know that just life is very, very dynamic. And so we tend to, without any rules or without a foundation to stand on, to understand, or being taught that on why we're doing things, we can do it for whatever reason feels good to us right now in the West. Emotionally, it'll be the thing, okay, you know, I'm looking at how I feel emotionally and how that satisfies me, or my bad relationships, or maybe I want to try something different. In other cultures, the reasons why they did it, and then maybe it happened to stick to, we don't understand that now. So I think without having all these bases, we create in our own minds what is satisfying or sufficient for us to do. We can take the idea of, okay, I can put my pinky in this pool of water and see how it is and see how it does, but we don't know the ramifications to ourselves and to others. So I think with looking at, from a female standpoint, a woman having more than one husband, just in our everyday, I'm sure many women would love to have more than one husband to be able to take care of the things that she feels might not be being taken care of. But then we have to look at, as a woman, how does it affect you? Because we know just from the young sister who was speaking just a moment ago, even though I might be able to have sex with more than one man, somebody in the morning, somebody in the PM, I can only carry one child at a time. And even in that, carrying that one child at a time, or having sex more than once, without us even having an understanding of how sex affects us in totality, physically, spiritually, and how that affects not only our spirit, but our physical self, we're getting ourselves into a whole bunch of stuff that in the end, when we're maybe having fibroids, maybe having problems with our reproductive system, maybe even have emotional issues, we don't know because we don't have any foundation of understanding, of technical knowledge to attribute to. So I think it's, for me, it's like understanding why those cultures in those moments chose that way. You know, was it something that they were doing before? And then what happened that they made a shift? You know, it could be very likely that all of a sudden there was many men and very few women. And in some way, shape, or form, these men still needed the support and the wisdom and the guidance that women gave to them, but without having the structure of marriage into it, it made it so it was very frivolous and meaningless. So to have this structure of saying, okay, at this time, we're going to have more than one man can marry a woman and have the benefits and the sanctity that all comes with that. That could have occurred, but we don't have all of that information historically right now. So we're kind of like, well, not kind of, we're basing our knowledge and how we feel it is or what would happen on where we sit right now in our prospective cultures. So it's a lot to unpack. For me, I can't see the logic in it as a woman, as someone who is here to give life. There's just so many pieces in that makes it difficult for me to function, taking all the emotion out of it. Do we know emotion is in it? Absolutely. Because if emotion wasn't in it somewhere, if passion wasn't in it somewhere, humans would not have sex. Sex is not as fun as we think it is. When we think about it, many of us have gotten, next day through a romp of sex and backs hurting, knees are hurting, reproductive areas hurting. Sex is not as fun as we think, but there's emotion tied to it. There's endorphins tied to it. There's all these things that makes it so it's fun. And that's critical because the goal of sex is to continue life. So we know without that key critical component, life would not go on for human beings. So there's just a lot to unpack, but I find it difficult to understand that if we look at the propagation of life and me as a woman being a vessel in which life can come through one dimension into the next, from a spiritual, energetic plane into a physical plane, then I have to look at, well, how would that affect me being with more than one man? I can't carry more than one child. And does that prohibit these men from being able to even have all that they need from that standpoint? Regardless of them all raising the child as their own, the reality of it is it's not. So it's a lot. But I think without the historical foundation of how we got here, how this became an option for these cultures, how this became even an option for us to talk about, it's difficult to really unpack it fairly and well. That's all I have to say.
Mhm.
Yes, thanks, Neferista. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I know in regards to in Tibet, for instance, it was strictly due to having a small amount of land, so they needed lesser mouths to feed. So a woman can only be pregnant for X amount of time throughout the year. So that's why it was done, or is done, because it's still practiced there in Tibet. I know in regards to India, theirs is coming from a spiritual foundation based on their goddess who was polyandrous and had 5 husbands. So in regards to South America, because it's practiced in South America as well, the only issue that I have in looking at a lot of these materials that I found, they tended to be done by European anthropologists. So therefore, I had to somewhat be discerning with the information that I was reading to know if this was their viewpoint, looking at a culture that they didn't fully understand, or if they had insight or knowledge or teaching from the elders in those communities to give them proper explanation. But I know in regards to, I think it was in the Congo, the woman wanted to have different bloodlines, reproduce for different bloodlines. So, but it's, as I said, it's very, very complex. Anyway, John had his hand up next. John, if you'd like to hear you speak, please.
The subject has moved on a little bit, but earlier on in the conversations, we've talked about spirituality in relationships. And I believe that once you have more than one partner, your energy is then divided into those relationships. So you're not giving the person that you're with your full energy. And from that, I don't believe that you're having a proper relationship either. And in order to have a relationship and a proper relationship, my belief is in order to have that as a strong relationship, it should be with one person. And then you can grow or die together with that, or that spiritual growth can go whatever direction it does. And if it does work, it works very well. And if it doesn't, then you move on to do something else. I think, yeah, just with spirituality, and we've also mentioned egos as well. Do women have egos in the same way that men do? You know, Bertha and Roz, are you both driven a little bit by your egos to have more than one relationship with a man? I'd be very interested to hear that, because with a man, I believe that a lot of it is ego driven to have maybe more than one relationship or to have many relationships. And yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's all I wanted to continue the conversation with, really.
Thank you, John. Would Roz or Bertha like to respond to that, please?
My ego doesn't play a part in having more than one husband. Oh, she left. But no, not in that sense.
Thank you, Bertha.
Is it just a bit part kind of a relationship then? So you'll have, different relationships for different parts that you need in your life. So you'll have one for maybe sex, one for maybe emotional stimulation, another one for being fun with. Is it that you just don't get everything that you want from one person and feel that you know, it could be done by having multiple relationships.
Yes and no. Like, some wouldn't be able to say provide me with the emotional stimulant where someone else could. There could be like two that would do pretty much the same, but not necessarily. It all matters in said person.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question of the males that are present? Because I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I can see the appeal as a female, of course, of this. Well, the more the conversation goes on, the more I think it doesn't appeal to me. But I can see the appeal for a female to have more than one partner, and more than one like male partner. And I can see the appeal of a woman to have a male partner who might have more than one female partner. But for the guys, I don't see what the draw to it would be, what the advantage would be, what the logic in it would be to have
Recording in progress.
a shared wife or a shared female partner that he shared with multiple men. I just, for the guys here, would there be any appeal to you?
Thank you, Nika. Karima had his hands up, so if we let Karima speak first, and then yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to answer the question. I just wanted to, I mean, I really agreed with what Neferista was saying, and touching on some of like the perspective challenges that we're having. I think there's a someone got their mic on. Okay. Yeah, so I think to address like some of the foundational things, there's a big difference that I can see between modern society and traditional society. And you know, everyone is going to have different views, different goals, and that's going to impact on our view and how and what we, you know, how we see this topic. So I think to address it, I can only really speak on my perspective. But if I take it back to the individual, like I've heard the notion that of fulfillment, like fulfillment in even like in a monogamous relationship. And my view is that if I'm going into a relationship to be fulfilled, there's a problem there already at that level. So that sets up the whole relationship to be a need, like there's a need that needs to be fulfilled. Now, obviously there's a logical need in terms of family, but if there is a lot of emotional and needs within a person that needs to be fulfilled from another person, that I think sets up a problem in any relationship. So the more people involved, it will just create more chaos. So I think in modern society, we're not looking at that aspect. Whereas in traditional society, I think the way children are raised, there's a maturity. So, I mean, we've spoken about sex, but like in traditional relationships, sex is not like the big issue. And even like, you know, because there's a reason, as I think Neferista mentioned, there's a reason behind everything that we do. So, you know, for me, it's about the goal. So it's about looking at, I mean, I mentioned family in the beginning, because when I think of a relationship, family is what's important. So, but there may be people that don't have that same goal. Maybe the relationship isn't about family. So that's where, you know, if we don't have the same goal, we're never going to agree. And that's okay. Like, I'm not here to, I don't have any need to force my view or impose on anybody else, but I know what my goal is. So my goal is to be fulfilled within myself when I enter any relationship. And I think if that is the case, then you have a greater capacity to be in a polygamous relationship, because you don't need it becomes like almost like a business without it sounding too cold, but it becomes very functional. And so there's you know, if there's a lot of needs within myself, I'm not going to be able to deal with a monogamous relationship, let alone a polygamous one. And so, yeah, to answer Nick's question, as a male, it's very simple. It's very simple for me. It's you know, my goal is to have as many children as I can provide for within my life. So if I'm going to be in a polyandrous relationship, what does that mean for me? That means I have to wait. You know, if she gets pregnant by one of the other husbands, then I'm waiting how long again before it's my turn to have a child. So it's very practical on the way I see it. And also I think about, as a child, how I understand it, the difference is, I think it was, is it Napa? She mentioned on the differences between male and females. And I think there's so many things to unpack, and this is a huge thing. So looking at the difference between like male and female energy, and females being known to be the nurturers, the honesty in me is, as a child, would I want to be raised by multiple women or multiple men? And I can honestly say that, you know, I would definitely choose to be raised in a family where there are many women, knowing that that will be, you know, that the capacity to nurture me as a child is there. Whereas I don't think naturally males have that nurturing role, especially at that young age, which is why nature tells the story. This is why women give birth. So not to say that it's not possible. Like there are many, you know, many males can carry a female energy, many women can carry a masculine energy. All of this is possible, and none of this is definite. But I think, to speak generally, to cover it, like the way I see it is, it's just about what is practical. And for me, I don't see any practicality in my goals. So that's why I wouldn't be in one.
Okay, can I just two things on that subject? When people talk about spirituality, and I'm not having a dig at you, Karima, in any way, but someone being complete and not needing the need for a relationship, you know, needing anything from anyone else. I don't believe that any of us are in that position where we don't need anything from anyone and can be considered as complete people as we are. And the second point is, I was brought up with by a single mother, and my mother taught me how to do everything as well as she could, and that meant to be able to cook, clean, and wash everything that I can. And I believe that I can provide a lot of the services a woman does to the children that I have. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying that I could do it better than a woman, not at all. But these are services that I can do, and I can do very well.
Thank you both for that. Kanipsa, would you like to respond to Nick's question to get some male energy in the place and your feedback?
Yeah, I would say, I think the conversation has been interesting. What is kind of standing out to me is we're talking about the polygamy, polyandry, and monogamous relationships, but within those structures, it seems like the focus is all on sex. But I think what those structures are really upholding is family. So those are like models to like how families are organized. And it's like the whole conversation is we're discussing just the sexual aspects of those. And that's just one aspect of what those models are are in place for. And when you look at the origins of the model of family, if you look as far back as you can, we see that that model is a model that is expressing polygamy and aspects of polygamy within that model. And it was not about, it's not a, when you research it, it's not a sexual, it's this, the story is not rooted just in sex. It's really about the strength of the family, and having a model and a blueprint to follow to have a strong family, to perpetuate your bloodline and to perpetuate the death and to have that destiny line, or have the mother to aid that bloodline. I'm not sure at what point in time and space what these cultures were facing that was practicing polyandry. We know that life and the existence is dynamic, and maybe that was an adjustment for a specific place and time and space, but the model that polyandry is even birthing out of is the model of polygamy. And when you look at polyandry, to her question, I see there's a big challenge when applying that to today, that there's a disconnect in who is the son, who is the child, who is the father of the child. And that's a huge issue. Because another man takes care of a child, or holds a child, or spends a lot of time with a child, doesn't make that man his father. Because there are so many aspects to that father that will aid that child. That father really holds the physical blueprint to how that child is supposed to navigate in the existence. And just to have a child to guess, and a mother to guess at who that father is, and supplement that with someone else that's another man that's not even part of that father's bloodline, to me is just a huge contradiction. And it's really, it really kind of points to where we are now, because honestly, when we look at it just from a sexual standpoint, we're doing all of that here in the West. We've been indoctrinated into monogamy, but from a sexual standpoint, but we polygamists, we polyandrous. You got a guy with 5 baby mamas. You got a woman, she got 5 baby daddies, and it's just a big hodgepodge of confusion. And what's not being expressed in there is the education of what family is. Like what is a father? What is a father? What is a father's role? What is a mother? What is a mother's role? And they're completely different. I disagree with them saying that they're really close and the same, and the only difference is one can have a baby and the other one can't. Like, there's a complete contrast. It's in the differences between a father and a mother, or a male and a woman and a man. You create life. Life comes out of those differences, so there's a huge difference in how they are to perpetuate their destiny in the existence. So, we see here in the West that, we've been indoctrinated into monogamy, but this here in the United States, it was built on polygamy. The slave master had slaves, he slept with, he's preaching monogamy, but he's sleeping with all of the women. and having babies. And we can see even the class structure that's created by those children that was coming from that slave master who get title as mulatto will have access to certain aspects of the business. And that even pulls into the differences between a house slave and a slave that's in the field. And then the slave, and then the wife of the slave master also had extracurricular relationships with some of the slaves, and there's ramifications for that. So again, I think that the models that we're speaking of really is not so much about the sexual aspects of it, but it's really points more to the strength of the family. And I think I think that's where the focus is really to discern, like, what does it mean to be a woman within that structure, or a mother within that structure? What does it mean to be a father? And what does it mean to be a child in those roles, and how they are supposed to be perpetuated?
I just wanted to come in to touch on something that Kenibsa was saying just there, mainly about polygamy being practiced in our society right now, and also the foundations of America being polygamous. I understand where you're coming from, but I have a distinction that I see is that traditionally, I don't see those as being polygamous activities, because when you talk about polygamy and polyandry, you're talking about marriage. This is a foundation towards family. So marriage is the precursor to the family. So the modern society now is looking away from all of those things. So people's ambitions and goals, like, anyone can be in a relationship, but to be in a marriage, that's a commitment. That's a lifelong commitment for the children, for the family. So I wouldn't agree that America was built on polygamy. I wouldn't agree that that modern society is polygamous. But I completely understand the point. So I'm not missing the point, and that's a very valid point. But I think it goes back to the goal. And just to answer, I don't know if John had a question for me about the need for fulfillment, but how I see that is that it comes down to the goal. If my partner or if my wife shares that goal in knowing that it's not that there isn't a need to be fulfilled, or that there are things missing and that we come complete, or that we are complete. But I do think part of being on this life is about addressing that. But as long as you're conscious of that, so that you're not projecting all your needs onto somebody else, that is a good foundation. So it's not to say that there are no needs. And I kind of corrected myself very quickly to say, of course there are needs. There are very, very practical needs. And there are emotional needs. But as long as we're conscious of our emotional needs, and we're conscious of all of our needs, our energetic needs, and we can find ways where someone doesn't have to fulfill them, we empower ourselves. And I'm just talking for myself. This is my goal. This is my purpose. I won't speak for anybody else, or whatever, anyone is capable of. This is my goal. That's the only perspective that I can really speak from. So I'm just talking about what makes sense to me.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I was speaking, I want to be clear that you understand. I was speaking to just the point that we were defining polygamy, monogamy, and polyandry from a sexual standpoint. From a sexual standpoint, we have men who sleep with multiple women. We have women who are having multiple male partners. Not from a cultural standpoint. I understand. I agree with you that that's my point, is more than the sexual aspects of polygamy and polyandry. It's really about family structure. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with what you've both said. And just to clarify what you were saying, Kanipsa, that type of behavior, it's called promiscuity. you know, and it's got nothing to do with the framework, the cultural and spiritual framework of marriage. So yes, Kenneman, you're the other male on the panel. Would you like to speak on this, please?
Okay. Yeah. You always find these sort of discussions interesting. And I always sort of back off of these sort of discussions because I think to myself, well, okay. One of the things that's really important to understand is your history. You need to know your history, because if you don't know your history, you don't know your future. You don't know your present. And one of the things that we're taught, that I'm taught, is that a human being only knows what he or she is exposed to. So if you don't know what happened in the past, then you're not going to know what to do in the present and what to do in the future, because you're not going to just know just like that. One of the things that I said at the very beginning is that I'm coming from a Kemetic culture. Now, the Kemetic culture is over 100,000 years old, and it's the highest civilization, the most long-lasting civilization that humanity's ever known. And no historian's going to argue with that. Why is that important? The reason why it's important is because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's already a model for us to follow. Now, one of the things that is within the Kemetic culture is polygamy. And it's interesting when you talk about polygamy. One of the things that's important about polygamy is knowing bloodlines. Now, the bloodline in the Kemetic culture, the bloodline comes from the father's side, and the destiny of an individual comes from the female side. This is very important. This is on a spiritual level, but it's not just on a spiritual level, it's on a physical level as well. Why is bloodline important? Bloodline is important because in the Kemetic culture that's existed for so long, we understand that you do not mix blood. You don't have ancestral relationships. Why don't you have ancestral relationships? If you have ancestral relationships leads to really bad physical disabilities like Down syndrome, brain damage. This is why it's so important in the Kemetic culture, which is the forefather and mother for all civilizations around the world, in fact. Because for a start, all languages come from the Kemetic culture. But going back to the bloodline, this is why it's important in the Kemetic culture for a child to know who the father is. This is one of the reasons. So we don't mix blood. It's very important that you don't mix blood. And this is why in the Kemetic culture, you have a bloodline name. You have a bloodline name because the bloodline name becomes a tag. Now, the reason why it becomes a tag so that you can keep an eye. So, for example, if my bloodline name is, for example, Kenneman. Now, I know that I can't have any relationships with any women by the name of Kenneman that also carries that bloodline name, because if I have a relationship with that woman, we're going to mix blood. Okay? And if we mix blood, then we're going to have. So the Kemetic culture is all about the preservation of life. Okay? Now, the idea of polyandry doesn't make sense because a child needs to know who the father is. And also, there's another thing that happens. According to the Kemetic culture, Every relationship that you have, sexual relationship that you have, and it's not about sex, it's about the preservation of life. It's about bringing about life. But every relationship you have, spiritually, that individual stays on you. If you're a woman, it's even worse. The energy of that individual stays on you for weeks, I think maybe even months. But for a man, it's different. That energy of that partner relationship doesn't stay on for so long. So it's not so damaging. So if a woman is seeing multiple partners, they're having that spiritual energy mixing with different multiple partners, and that causes a lot of damage from a spiritual perspective. So never come from the perspective of reinventing the wheel. I will say, if it's not coming from the Kemetic culture, that is the most long-lasting civilization to ever exist, and no historian's going to argue with that, then I'm not for it. And if you look at the state of the world today, no thank you. If you look at the state of the world today and where we're going, the problem is that we're being led by a very corrupt modern society. And that's why we have a certain amount of, and it's understandable, but a certain amount of arrogance about us, where we feel that we need to, instead of going to traditional societies that are living much longer than us, that are much more healthier than us, instead of going to them and finding out how they go about doing things, we have the arrogance in the West to think, oh no, we can do it better because we've gone to Oxford or Harvard or whatever, right? So my perspective is that. Now, polyandry may have been a survival mechanism. I don't know. But it could have been a survival mechanism. It's definitely not recommended within a Kemetic culture, but it could have been a survival mechanism at some point. Or it could have been the very simple fact that there's been so much corruption over the years. And just because something's old, it doesn't mean that it's right. Something can be like, 5,000 years old, it can still be corrupt. So that's basically my standpoint on it. And that's why I always have a problem with these sort of discussions. I'm thinking, well, looking at the state of the society today and where it's going, with the gender confusion and all sorts of nonsense going on here, you can see we're heading on a path of self-destruction. So my perspective is always a perspective of returning back to the culture that existed before, and finding out that blueprint that one of the gentlemen has already mentioned, that blueprint, that model that we've already had that lasted, and following that in order to move forward. That's my perspective on that. But yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Kenneman. Greatly appreciated. And yeah, what we noticed that society actually promotes promiscuity. They don't even teach our children abstinence in school. They don't even teach them to have relationships inside a marriage framework, whether it's monogamous or polyandrous or polygyny. They don't teach them that. And yeah, we're seeing society going rapidly downhill. And there are many children out there that, even if they may even know their father are not playing a role in their lives. There are many children out there who have brothers and sisters who they don't even realize are their brothers and sisters, because those relationships weren't formed in the proper framework of marriage. And as it was pointed out before, polyandrous relationships, polygamous relationships are not about sex. It never has been. And so I know that Bertha and Rose said that they were interested in polyandrous relationships, but I do know that they did not say it was based upon sex either. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on the subject that's not spoken yet, please?
I'd like to speak. I'd like to clarify something. Now, I want to make this clear. We understand that relationships are not solely about sex. We have relationships with our friends. We have relationships with our family. But the very unique thing about marriage is that it is sexual. So it's important for us to really get real with each other and not be afraid to say that marriage has a foundation of sexual relationship. I'm well aware as a relationship counselor and as an individual that marriage is not just about sex. Of course not. But we need to stop saying it's not about sex. It's not about sex when we talk about marriage. Because if you are an ancient, if you want to be about an ancient culture, which I'm getting the idea, I hear people saying about Kemet, and these are great ideas. I have an affinity to Kemet as well. I'm actually married to someone who embraces the Kemetic culture in a sense, not fully, but anyway, I digress. So if you're talking about ancient, we need to really, really get real with each other and say marriage is first and foremost about sex. It doesn't mean that we're just having sex all day. It's about reproduction. That's what the brother said, Kinnaman. That's what the sister, I think it's Neferista. When you talk about reproduction, you're actually speaking about sex. It's okay if we say marriage is about sex, because that is what separates us from other relationships. I can have friends who are male, but I don't have sex with them. You see what I'm saying? So if we could really stop saying over and over, it's not about sex, it's not about sex. We all understand that it's not, we're complex beings. We all understand this. You're beautiful, spiritual people. I hear all you speaking, but we do ourselves a disservice when we continue to use that mantra, which is very much a disillusion, that marriage isn't about sex. Of course it is. And everything that you want in marriage will fall apart if you don't realize that you're having a sexual relationship with someone and it's based on trust and respect, and you have common goals, but it is a sexual relationship. When you talk about these relationships, I said this about, now Kasadi said, no, let's not talk about polygyny, but I am going to talk about polygyny because we had a panel. I told the sisters, we need to be real with
If I could just, excuse me, so if I could just step in there one second before. I disagree that marriage is about sex.
Yes,
it's not about
I understand,
sex.
and I will finish my statement,
marriage,
and then you
sorry,
can.
let me finish. A marriage is about.
I was actually speaking, but go ahead.
It's about family. It's about the preservation of life. That's
sex. Thank you, sir.
No,
that's
but you don't put the sex before the preservation of life.
But that's sex.
You say it the other way around.
Don't be afraid to say, excuse me, and I appreciate you jumping in.
I'm not afraid of anything.
I love a lively conversation, so I have no problem with you interrupting. I love the lively conversation. But at the core, when you talk about when you talk about reproduction and family, how do we make families? We make families through sexual union. Now you need to have a marriage between two people who trust each other, respect each other, and have the same common goals. But it is a sexual relationship. And when we talk about polyandry, we absolutely 100% are talking about a woman having multiple sexual, we're all saying the same things. when we're saying about bloodlines, those are excellent points. It's sex. You're having sex with more than one man as a woman when you're practicing polyandry. That sex with more than one man causes a confusion. Whose child is it? And it also causes the man whose child it isn't to have to wait to proliferate or to push forward his bloodline. So it's all about sex. We're very complex spiritual people. We all understand that we're not talking about brute beasts reproducing in a field. We know that, but we must understand that when we say things like family, bloodline, those are conversations about sexual activity. So the reason I'm making this clear is because when you approach such relationships, even monogamy, when you approach a marriage, you are really needing to understand, I'm going to have a special relationship with this person or these people. And why am I having a special relationship? Because I'm sharing all of my intimate self, physically and spiritually. We know easily we can discuss the spirit. Everyone's discussing the spiritual side, but we need to really be honest about the physical side. And the physical side is sex. We cannot reproduce and have bloodlines and families without sex. Now I'm going to say this, with that understood, when a woman is saying, I'm considering polyandry, when you're considering polyandry, you need to understand you're not just going to be holding hands with that man. Those men are going to want to have babies with you. They're going to want to have sex with you. So there's the issue. I just wanted to throw that in. I have no problem with us. I'm on the same page with you with the whole bloodline and family, but it is about sex. It is. And one more thing I want to say to women, I want to talk to the women. You need to understand about your physical selves. You need to educate yourself on what your body does as far as multiple partners. You need to know these things, as not just about having babies, but about the microbiomes in yourself. So yes, there's a lot, but I had to jump in because I keep hearing everyone say it's not about sex, it's not about sex. Then it's not marriage. If it's not about sex, you're having friendships. That's what you're having. Okay.
Well, I think you're just stating your opinion, Nepal, like everybody else
I'm a
is doing.
professional, Kasati.
Everyone else
more
is.
than one time. Let me explain something to you, what I do for my career.
Oh,
I
gosh.
counsel people on these issues. It's not
Wait,
just, it is my opinion.
Nepal, if you gave Kasati just a moment to finish her sentence, what she said is, you're stating your opinion like everybody else is. She did not disagree with you. Yeah, but it's sometimes when you're speaking, you're sort of throwing out statements like everybody wants to say that. I haven't said that. There's certain things you've said that I haven't said that, so I don't agree with every single thing you're saying. So don't sort of say everyone has their opinion, everyone gets an opportunity to speak, but the phrase everybody's saying that, everybody's thinking that. If you could just refrain from that, because that's irritating me. Because
your husband jumped in and he irritated me by interrupting me. So anyway, let's move forward. I don't want to argue. We're not going to get personal.
Kasati's in charge. When we're ready to move forward, Kasati will let us know. Yeah.
No, actually, I'm also a moderator. And let me say this, by the way. If this is bothering you, what I'm saying, this is a very hot topic. This is a very hot topic. I'm sorry if it makes you emotional. I actually am speaking not just from my opinion, but from a professional standpoint. Now, if you don't like it, you don't have to agree, just like all of us have different opinions. However, when Kasati comes in and says, Napa, that's your opinion, she's discounting what I just said. I don't come behind her and say, Kasati, that's your opinion on a regular. Now, if you'd like to have me hand the mic over to someone else and continue talking about the topic, which it is a marriage, it's a marriage relationship. If we could get back on the topic of sex and stop saying it's not about sex, it is actually, marriage is based on a sexual union between people, man and woman, man and multiple women, woman and multiple men, but it is about sex. So I'm sorry if that offended you, Shadiah, but marriage is about sex. Can we all agree? We
I
can't all
think
agree that marriage is about sex,
there's
right?
no reason to be condescending here. There really isn't any
I'm not
reason to be condescending.
I'm not
There's
condescending.
people that have their hands up, so I'd like to hear them
Yes,
speak,
please.
please. Thank
Does
you.
anybody want to comment on
Neferista,
the marriage being sex?
Neferista, you had your hands up first, and then we'll go to Rose, please.
Wonderful. We're all adults here, I thought. Now that's condescending.
I'm not sure. Can I go now? Are you
Yes,
finished?
please. Yes.
Okay, could you put your mic on mute so that I won't have any background? Thank you.
Oh, sure.
So I know when I was speaking a little bit about how this is a big, big topic, and I can speak for myself, but it may be what some others are saying, because I know I might have, but I don't think I did say, you know, the goal wasn't sex. And I think that's because, to clarify, I spoke about how when we look at humanity and just how we are as physical beings, the reality of none of us would have sex if that emotional endorphin part wasn't there, because it's not really a fun act. So even those portions that are there so that we can continue to propagate and have life, the preservation of life and life going forward, it has to be there, it would never happen. So I think what some may be saying is sex is not about fun. It's not about just having sex for fun. And that's something that we see has been in the media, all over the world, in society. We see that now sex is being promoted just more for fun. You can have it with anyone, anywhere, choose what you want to do. And the foundation, not in ancient times, because ancient means something that's old and dead and no longer doing, but in traditions, sex isn't about fun. It's about the preservation of life. So I think maybe everybody was kind of saying the same thing, but without those clarity being brought. And then again, in traditions, people just weren't emotional. They weren't as emotional as we see now. I happened to be raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather was born in 1896 and my grandmother was born in 1912. And they just, this need for, okay, somebody has to tell me they love me all the time, and somebody has to make me feel good, and somebody has to stroke my emotions. That just really didn't exist. It was something that was, the foundations was based on the roles and the function of the preservation of the family and the preservation of life. So we see now that what we find in a lot of our movement nowadays in the modern culture is very much, it's more emotion-based and opinion-based and how we feel and what we're doing. And even from a standpoint of, this is all we've learned thus far in our walk of life, whatever that would be, whether it's professional, whether it's because of just life, whether it's because of growth and we've lived to be 100 years old or 60 years old, but it's still only going to be based with what we've been exposed to. So it's a lot to unpack in a call like this from varied people with varied opinions, feelings, etc. But I think it's just really more about that sex isn't for fun. And of course, a marriage, a union, the sex component has to be there because it's about life, and that's the only way it can come forward, but it's not about fun. And when we see us putting the fun into it and making that part of it, we tend to put the cart before the horse. We can even see that in our everyday relationships now, whether it's polyandry or it's polygamous or monogamous. Folks want to have sex before they've gotten the commitment there. So I think, again, going back to without the historical context and the technical knowledge, we just really don't always see the reasons why groups of people did what they did. and made the decisions to do what they did, or why they even continue to do it. But it's getting back to the root of things. And I do believe that when we look at even 50 years ago to now, there was quite a bit more stability in the culture then than what it is now. And a lot of that was because those people were still closer to what was traditionally being upheld than what has occurred now, where it's really more about how you feel and what is best for you in how you feel. So there's a lot to unpack in this conversation, but I think it's been a very interesting one. And I'm glad that I've gotten to be a part to hear what everybody had to say.
Thank you, Neferista. Thank you for that. We need to wrap up now. And just to do a quick check, for those who at the beginning were not in favor of polyandry, if you've changed your minds, could you put your hands up, please? Which I think is going to be, most people's hands are going to be down. And the two who were considering, had interest in, Roz and Bertha, do you have a different viewpoint now, having heard the discussion? Very briefly, please.
I haven't got a different opinion, but I realize that my idea of what polyandry will be, a lot of people seem to have a different idea. They seem to be basing it all on the sex thing, where to me, people enter into marriages for many different reasons, not just sex. It could be companionship, it could be for financial reasons, it could be any reason. So just to keep saying people get married to have sex, you can have sex anytime. Sex has been around since the world began. It is nothing new. So it's not just sex that everything is based on in life anymore. So yes, I still have the same view, but not from the places I've heard other people coming from it with.
Thank you, Rose. Alberta?
I agree with Roz. Like, my views haven't changed, but like hearing everyone talk and say that like the cultures are different, which I had no clue about. And it's also just like I should do more research upon into the cultures and see how it's done there, which I will. But it's actually quite interesting to hear from everybody's point of view.
Thank you, Berta. Thank you. We have to wrap up. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to say? If not, we'll say thank you.
Yes, I actually want to close out and say thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you especially to Esoteric for inviting me. I do want to speak on something that we haven't touched on yet, and I'd like to say this in closing about the man and his feelings as far as being in a relationship where he has to share one woman with other men, and he's also restricted from being able to go out and have relationships on his own. That would be the definition of polyandry. You know, if you're a man that's ever considering doing such a relationship, you really want to keep in mind that we know men, again, are hardwired to reproduce with multiple women. I think it was the brother Karima, I think that's how you say your name. He said he wants to have as many children as he can, that he can financially afford. And so that is something that's innate with men. Men want to spread their seed in a marriage. It's ideally should be in a marriage, I agree. And men want to reproduce, and that keeps a bloodline strong. That keeps a nation strong. So just there, looking at a man having to restrict that and being restricted from doing that, in a marriage where he can only reproduce with one woman, you have to really consider what you're doing to yourself as a man, how much you value yourself as a man. And then the woman, she has to consider that as well. If you say that you are in marriage not for sex, which obviously I made that clear, that marriage isn't just about sex, and you say it's about emotion, as a woman who wants to practice polyandry, you should consider the feelings of the men and what you're doing to the natural man. You're restricting him from spreading his bloodline and proliferating his seed and his progeny. So I did want to point that out, that a man is in a predicament where he is left to really restrict himself and not produce like he wants to. So thank you so much, Esoteric, for inviting me once again. Thank you to everyone. And I hope this was edifying, and I hope that moving forward, we can put our emotions aside and walk away from this still as friends, and you know, nothing personal at all. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for all the guests, and I don't see anyone that was being emotional, actually, to be honest. We were just stating our viewpoints, which everyone has the right to do. And yeah, thank you all again for your time, your input, your energies, and hope to see you the next time that we're around. And thank you, Esoteric, for this. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you for sharing well.